Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome, ironradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiology and sports nutrition professor of about 15 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I am a powerlifter, Highland Games athlete. I run Strength Guild and just a bunch of stuff. So,
this is Dr. John Mike. I'm an assistant professor in exercise science. I like to eat. I like to lift. I like to take up a lot of space. And my dissertation, the effects of eccentric contraction duration on max strength, power, vertical jump, and soreness, has been recently accepted into Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research for the NSCA. And I'll be speaking at the NSCA Personal Trainer Conference next week in Jacksonville, Florida. Hopefully it won't get canceled because of the hurricane. So aside from that, it's nice to be on.
And then joining us today that we're going to get to, we got Kaylee Hochschild. I hope I didn't butcher your last name.
No, you're right.
And we're going to get to Kaylee here in a little bit. Lonnie's got some news, but basically she is a former athlete and current athlete, sprinter, new strength coach, all the above. So, Lonnie, what do you got for us today, news?
Cool stuff. I have 2 listener mails and 1 bit of news. So let me get the news out of the way first because there's only one. I just saw this morning having my coffee.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This is about glycemic index. So let me just set this up. It says, this is from an editor. This isn't from the journal itself. I went and pulled the study, but it says blood sugar or blood glucose increases every time we eat and it decreases while we sleep. But the body typically goes to great lengths to maintain, glucose concentrations in the healthy range. Some people, however, have difficulty keeping blood sugar in the healthy range and may develop type 2 diabetes as a result. To help regulate blood sugar, some people choose foods with a, quote, low glycemic index, close quote, because these foods are thought to trigger less severe blood sugar spikes. However, a new study provides convincing evidence that a food's published glycemic index may not be very helpful in this regard after all. So this, if listeners are familiar, low glycemic foods, things that have soluble fiber, oats, apples, things of that nature, they don't raise your blood sugar very much. I've actually measured this in the lab before with students. So you could give someone a really fast-acting carbohydrate like a brown-skinned potato or white bread, and their blood sugar will jump up from, fasting values around 80 to 130, 140. I've seen lifters even go higher than that when they were sore, actually, because I think their muscles are a little sore and resistant. But on the flip side, really, a lot of people rely on this stuff. So let me read the paper here. The paper is by Mathan and colleagues. It's brand new from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and I mean brand new. It's called Estimating the Reliability of Glycemic Index Values and Potential Sources of Methodological or Biological Variability. The background says the utility of the glycemic index values for chronic disease management remains controversial. And then it goes on to say there is a dearth of information, I love that word, on the reliability of glycemic index values and potential sources of variability in healthy adults. So we examined the intra, right, so within one person, and inter-individual, or across people, variability of the glycemic response. They looked at straight glucose and white bread. So they're looking at things that really swing your blood sugar. They gave them 50 grams, and they did serum glucose and insulin monitoring for 5 hours, which is longer than usual. Usually these oral glucose challenges are about 2 hours. So they're being very thorough. They did different types of calculations, area under the curve, all these different things. Here's what they found. The mean and standard deviation of the glycemic values for white bread was 62 plus or minus 15. So again, listeners, think about this on a 100 scale if you're not familiar. Law-abiding, non-speedy carbohydrates like beans, they chug along. Their glycemic index is going to be like 20, right? White bread is usually considered very high. If things are over 70, it's considered a very high glycemic index. So here they've got, just the variability. So it's 62 plus or minus 15. It says even inter-individual, so again, within the same person, their coefficient of variation, the up and down percentage, was 20 to 25%. So that doesn't bode very well. If you believe those glycemic index tables, it's just saying part of this is biological variability. So maybe your stress hormone's a little higher today. Maybe you slept more poorly. You get the idea. There's a lot of things that go into this. It says among the biological factors assessed, insulin index and glycated hemoglobin, so that's more of a long-term test for how good your blood sugar is controlled, explained about 15% of the variability in people's different, daily differences to glycemic index. Conclusion, these data indicate that there is substantial variability in individual responses to GI value tables. So there it is. I don't know, maybe that's bad news for some people. I don't think it's bad if you're ballparking, right? Remembering things like oats and apples and beans are lower glycemic and things like corn flakes are way higher, but it varies quite a bit. It looks like it varies quite a bit. So there's some websites that are resources for this, like Mendoza.com. It's just phonetic, Mendosa. He has access to all kinds of government databases on glycemic index. And for the longest time, I thought that was very helpful, and it is handy. But I think we shouldn't obsess over it. And this new paper says so. I mean, don't obsess over those numbers like they're exact. I don't know, maybe we're just back to focusing on stuff that's less processed, eat the potato, not the French fry kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have two questions, and everybody jump in on these. The first one is something I think that slowly Phil and Rob and I developed over the first couple of years of this podcast. Not created, but I think we refined it. It's about holding a body weight, a new body weight. But he says, hey, thanks so much for all you do. I found the podcast several months ago, and I've just finished all the back episodes. I especially learned a lot about what it takes to gain size. I've been 5'7", 155 since high school. I'm 24 now, so I recently and painfully upped my intake to about 4,000 calories per day, and now I sit at 175. Pretty good. Yeah. I thought maybe you could clarify something for me. There's always been a lot of interest in the holy grail of gaining muscle and losing fat simultaneously, and I understand both as an athlete and as a scientist, I'm a chemist, that this generally doesn't work. But on the show, you often advocate the idea of gaining some weight of questionable composition, then holding the higher body weight and allowing the body to quote-unquote recompose. Is this not essentially gaining muscle while losing fat? Is there something special about doing this at a higher body weight instead of trying to do it at a lower body weight that makes it more feasible? I'm interested in your thoughts. Keep up the good work, Cody.
I'll hit on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, essentially you're doing it in a calorie surplus, not a calorie, with excess calories, not trying to do it while you're cutting calories. So basically you were at this excess that now slowly became maintenance. But most people, when they're trying to do this, they're trying to do it when their calories are lower than maintenance level, which makes it pretty much impossible.
Agreed.
Really hard without the use of pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the biggest thing. I mean, you're eating fuel, and you've created an extra fuel source that your body carries around as well. So
right.
You're able to slowly, mind you, recompose a bit.
To reiterate what you said in a slightly different way is, yeah, this is not simultaneous. You know, you're not trying to gain muscle and lose fat on, you know, like 2,500 calories a day or 3,000 calories a day. Some rank beginners can actually do that because they're so unadapted. They're so completely blank slate that, you know, anything they do is going to improve them in some way. They're going to get some adaptations. But the idea here is, yeah, you eat, like Phil said, above calorie needs, so it's surplus. But once you reach that new body weight, that is now a maintenance calorie for you. Now, this is all ballpark, of course, because metabolism changes, you know, up and down and whatnot. But the idea, and again, this is sort of theoretical, and it's important for a chemist to understand this. I cannot point to specific papers. This is just something I think Phil and I have seen in different settings, right? Either from a nutritionist or a strength coach. At some point over many months, your body weight set point will change. And then if you continue to lift heavy, because presumably you can move bigger weights because you're a bigger person, right, that you will continue to gain muscle mass at that bigger size. I can't tell you this is because of, point to something in your leptin system, you know, or something in your hypothalamus or pituitary that's governing your set point, right? Normally about 10% above or below your set point, you have a lot of pressures in your body, a lot of homeostatic mechanisms that are trying to drive you back to where you were. It's that 10% number is, you could point to textbooks and literature on that. So, and that's about where you are, buddy. So that you have to be careful. And I just think it's wiser to try to hold that new, you know, you put on the 20 pounds like you've done, hold it for several months, move some bigger weights, keep the calories higher than when you were smaller, and then your body, you will have those adaptations. But don't think about this as simultaneous. It's really not. You're just trying to move some bigger weights as a bigger man, and then hopefully over a couple of months or to several months, we don't know how long this is or even how well this works necessarily in the literature, you're better off, you know, in the end. Like Phil said, instead of trying to eat a fairly low-calorie diet and somehow gain muscle, because that's not going to work very well. So, I have one more. This one, and maybe Dr. Mike can chime in on this one. This is from John in Wisconsin, 53-year-old male. Asks about sarcopenia. So he doesn't want to start to lose muscle tissue as he ages, but he was diagnosed with atrial fibrillation, AFib, during a great powerlifting program, it says. Can you give advice on lifting with heart issues? Doctor's orders are to lose weight and only lift light weights. How do I grow muscle under those conditions?
Wow, that's a really good question. But the first thing I would definitely say is, you know, definitely want to talk to your, you know, primary care physician, your cardiologist for, you know, a little bit more specific guidelines, just because, you know, we're not, you know, medical doctors on the show that specialize in these types of issues. But we can certainly give some guidelines. There's some interesting stuff out there, and what I could find is cardiovascular diseases, all those types of things. It's always a lot more heavy in terms of the research and science on the endurance side, on the aerobic side, than it is resistance training. And just to give you an example, that used to be the heavy case with people that have type 2 diabetes, but, you know, over the course of time, actually resistance training is typically even better for those that have type 2 diabetes. But typically for those for that AFib, typically, I mean, you can train aerobically, you know, 3 to 5 days a week. There's some guidelines about training anywhere from, you know, maybe 75 to 95% of, you know, your peak heart rate. Frequency is about 120 minutes to 200 minutes per week. A combination of aerobic and endurance exercise. There doesn't seem to be any particular, like, really specific guidelines for the resistance training part. And one study was talking about how there's no particular weight limit for proper exercise safety in terms of resistance training exercise, but make sure you can lift the weights comfortably. I mean, I know that's really vague, but to kind of go back to your question in terms of like sarcopenia with the age-related muscle loss, I mean, you do need to lift a fairly heavier load, and I'm not saying you need to do like a max, 1 rep maxes all the time, but I would even go so far as to actually, we've talked about this on the show a lot, is eccentric exercise, because eccentric exercise, it doesn't weigh the burden of accumulative fatigue, and it doesn't have as much O2 cost, has a less energy yield to be able to do the exercises versus concentric movements. And so I would start incorporating eccentric exercise because you can use a heavier load without the cumulative fatigue. And you'll just have to kind of see how that really works. I mean, yes, I think you can do just normal, even machines. Most machines kind of help with accommodating the strength curve. I mean, yes, they're in sagittal plane, but a combination of like free weights and machines, because even though you have that type of condition, you definitely want to put on or maintain as much lean body mass as you can, just so you can try to combat age-related effects of muscle loss. So
yeah,
I hope that helps.
Just a few things. Good point. We're not medical doctors. I am a professor. I've taught pathophysiology, so let me tell you what I do know. One is atrial fibrillation. And for listeners who aren't familiar, think about the upper chambers of your heart, not quivering necessarily, but they're not pulsatile, they're not beating in unison with the rest of the heart as well, and it can cause blood clotting. AFib is also often related to other heart conditions, so you have to be careful. A lot of these guys, because of the clotting risk, they're sometimes on anticoagulant drugs that a lot of people call blood thinners. So you have to be careful, and that's why Dr. Mike is telling you, check with your doctor, right? Say, listen, I'm going to lift. Help, right? Don't just tell me not to lift, because that's going to hurt my long-term health, and I'm determined to lift. Work with me here. And if he won't, fire him and go to a doctor who is willing to work with you for your health goals, right? So,
yeah, and I think, for whatever reason, and maybe this is just tradition or just what people have thought to be the case, when it comes to like cardiovascular disease and all these types of conditions, I think one of the reasons why people tend to steer away from resistance training with a lot of clinical types of things or diseases is because like physiologically and in terms of physiological adaptation, with endurance exercise, you don't get, it's been researched for like decades. You do get decreases in, resting heart rate and resting and exercise blood pressure and all that stuff. And so from like a cardiovascular perspective, between endurance and resistance training, you don't get the increases in like BP with endurance exercise as you do with like heavy resistance training. And what I mean is somebody who does strength training, 4 or 5 days a week, with heavier load. It's not uncommon for systolic blood pressure to be 300 plus millimeters of mercury, like, during the set, as opposed to endurance exercise. So I think traditionally people tend to steer away from that because they think, well, resistance training is going to, build up pressure, in arterial walls and all that other stuff. But you can do lighter resistance training work and not really have that as much of an effect. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I like the tip. And again, we're just telling you to consider these things, John, because we're not telling you to go do them, but
right.
The negatives, using eccentrics, using negatives, slow lowering of the weight, even with the machine, you can get really sore and build a lot of muscle doing that stuff with less systemic strain, so.
Now, we're going to talk to Kaylee. Kaylee, we're just going to do like normal here. We need to know, basically, what's your background? What got you into strength training? Where did you come from? And lead on up to right before we get basically the topic of the day, which is starting out in the strength and conditioning field. So how'd you get started lifting at all?
Well, I think I first started lifting just in high school and, your basic weight class my freshman year. And I started just, doing classes just kind of for fun thing. And I realized, I was kind of pushing some heavy weight compared to some of the other girls my age. And it just kind of grew from there, honestly. I have an uncle who is the head strength and conditioning coach at Basehor Linwood High School, Ross Suizo, and he has developed a strength and conditioning, a phenomenal program there, and he actually has a powerlifting team. So his high schoolers go to competitions and they compete, and he was like, hey, you should try this. So my junior year, I did it. I was playing basketball at the time, so I didn't get to go to very many meets. And, I was beating girls. I was doing pretty well. And I was like, man, this is fun. So I kept doing that winter. The following winter, first that fall, the fall in my senior year was when I first went to Phil's gym, back when he was in Lena's garage, and trained with him for a little bit. And, he kind of told me the same thing, like, you're good at this. Like, you're strong. We can get you doing some serious stuff. So then I went into that next winter. I ran indoor track instead of playing basketball, and then I did powerlifting. I went that whole season being undefeated. And in high school powerlifting, it's a bench, a squat, and a hang clean, and then you can win off of your power index. So did that, beat a lot of girls, thought it was really fun. But then I went on to run track and field in college. So Phil kind of gives me a hard time about that. And went to Northwest Missouri State. Ran track, was a sprinter and a multi, so I did the heptathlon. Loved it, had a lot of fun. Picked up 2 degrees. One of them was in corporate wellness, and the other one was in therapeutic recreation. So it sounds kind of funny. Corporate wellness was basically like an exercise science degree, and then therapeutic rec was working more with special populations like people with disabilities and geriatrics, and how to train them and work with them in, kind of the fitness world. So I really loved it, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with that yet. I played around with both of the degrees and jumped all over. There was one summer that I worked at a camp for people with disabilities, and I really, really liked that. But I wasn't sure if I wanted to make it my career. Then the following summer, I actually interned with my uncle, Ross Suizo, at Basehor, coaching the high school kids in the weight room. And it was fun. Basically went into it just doing it for fun, wasn't really sure if I was going to like it, bunch of high school kids. I ended up loving it. Had so much fun. I learned a lot. Working with high school kids was so much fun. They're so good to just mold. I had a lot of freshmen. I mainly worked with the freshmen, like dancers, so it was really hard. Different kind of group to train, especially weight trainings. They didn't want to bulk up. They didn't want to do this. They don't want to do curls, blah, blah, blah. But it was just so fun, and that's kind of where it fell into place for me, I think. So, yeah, I grew up in Topeka. I went to Shining Heights. Now I'm back in Topeka and training with Phil now. So now that I'm done running track, I fell back into the love of doing weightlifting. He's taught me so much about Olympic lifting, so I'm getting a little better at that, and then I'm also doing powerlifting training, too. And that's about it.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we want to touch on. When we met, like I said, you were the person on the powerlifting team. Like, she was the Shawnee Heights powerlifting team, right? Which was kind of neat. And then went from there. And then, what I want to bring on today, which is we'll have to go to break here and come to the topic of the day. But and now you've recently taken a position, so we'll get into that here in a minute and just talk to people about, starting out in the strength and conditioning field. So. Lonnie, we'll go to break and hit a commercial here, and then we'll hit that up. So.
Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that. And I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks.
Fall and soon winter will be upon us. As the holidays approach and your thoughts turn to giving, please consider your friends here at ironradio.org. Over the past several years, there have been hundreds of listener comments hoping that Iron Radio stays on the air for years to come. Iron Radio is here for you. But as with any public radio type format, the show is listener supported. That's where you come in. For just $4 per month, you can become a supporting member, keeping your weekly dose of education, experts, and gym talk flowing. Just go to www.ironradio.org and click on the $4 monthly subscribe button near the bottom of the page, or click the donate button at the right of the page for a one-time donation. You are the Iron Brotherhood and Sisterhood. Thanks for helping to create a place for better internet programming for all strength and muscle sports, and happy holidays.
Hi, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry, and on behalf of Phil and Rob, I'd just like to let listeners know that if you love us or you hate us, we'd like you to leave a comment or perhaps vote for us on iTunes. It helps us out quite a bit on the popularity side of things. You can also follow Dr. Lowry, me, on Twitter. It's Lawnman7 on Twitter if you want to do that. We also have a Facebook page, the Iron Radio listeners page. So whether it's leaving a comment or voting for us or following us on Twitter or Facebook, that would be fantastic. Also, occasionally Rob or myself will write an article for another website, and Phil will as well. So lots of ways to interact, follow us in other media, and vote for us, and keep things going strong on Iron Radio. Thanks.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more, that's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, we are back. Again, we got Kaylee Hostel. And we're going to talk about starting out in, the strength and conditioning field. Like you talked about before the break, you kind of didn't know what you wanted to do. When you first came back here this summer, you were working on the physical therapy side with like rebound and interning there. And then you've landed a position at the university here as what's your official title? Sorry, assistant strength coach, I think it is, or
graduate assistant.
Graduate assistant strength coach. So, and I want to go into that. I mean, just kind of how that came about. What was the application process, and then we'll go into the more fun stuff like the realization of what do you like about it, what kind of fits, what doesn't, hours, things like that. So.
Yeah, for Washburn, it first started out they were looking to hire an assistant strength coach, and just graduating college. I have just my 2 undergrad degrees. I don't have my CSCS yet. I hadn't had my USAW. Safe to say I wasn't very qualified at the time, but I still applied. Didn't really get past HR, probably because they said I was only 22. Anyways, they ended up hiring their graduate assistant, so they called me. They're like, hey, we liked your application. Would you like to be our grad assistant? Or interview for it. So I went in. I had to send in my resume again, the cover letter, and then I went in for an interview, and I sat down with the head coach and then now the new assistant coach, and just went through a basic interview. They questioned me on periodization training and hypertrophy and, just some name-known people, and basically just tested my knowledge and ended up getting the job the next day. I think I kind of walked into it a little bit easier than some other people would have. I got the job pretty late in the game. They were kind of needing a person in the last minute, and I know it was just a few of us that they interviewed. But yeah, I was kind of lucky. I know that if I was going to apply there was a grad assistant spot at Mizzou, I can imagine the process would have been a little bit harder for sure.
Well, I mean, there's something to be said for being at the right place at the right time and just putting yourself out there too.
Definitely.
Let's go into, I know one of the first realizations that you've had is the hours. You know, we've talked about this. So.
Yeah, well, my day, it's kind of been a little different. My schedule's been all over the place right now, but I have cheerleaders that come in about 6 or 6:30 in the morning, and that's a couple days a week. And then for a while, I would not have any athletes come in except for a couple of stragglers until 2:30. So, yeah, my day was really early morning, very late at night, pretty typical. And now it's kind of shifting a little bit. The tennis is going into an off season, and golf is starting up in their off season. So I'll have golf at 7 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I'll have tennis and cheer at 5 and 6 in the morning on the other 2 days, and then I'll also have some tennis kids that come in at like 1. So I definitely have that early morning, a little later in the day, not quite as late as it could be, but it can make for a long day, definitely.
Yeah. And that's what we were talking about. I mean, even in the private sector or the university, this and that, you're usually your hours are at the whim of everybody else. You know,
Right.
At the university level, you know, the strength coach at the university level is like, it comes after the sport, after the this and that. It's like, we're going to fit you in where we have to.
Yeah.
So you kind of get like those before and after hours or in between classes. And so.
Hey, let me ask just quickly then. Is there any frustration that you're around weights all the time, but sometimes it's hard to actually get to them yourself? Or do you feel like you get lots of time to actually grab the barbells?
Oh my gosh, I went through, and I mean, Phil can vouch for this. There was like 2 weeks that I only came in, you know, a handful of times. And yeah, I mean, my family makes fun of me. They're like, "You're getting kind of cranky. I think you need to go into Strength Guild, like, go get your lifting." And it was just because I couldn't come in the morning because I had kids coming in, and then I wasn't able to get there in the afternoon because I had tennis group until 6 or 6:30, and it was kind of frustrating. And there was a few days, you know, I can lift at Washburn during my downtime, so that is nice. If I already know the program pretty much set up that Phil has us rolling on, I was able to do some lifts there, mainly just my powerlifting stuff. I don't really like to do my Olympic lifting there. They don't have the female bar. I'm kind of turning into a 33-pound bar snob. So
Washburn's in Kansas, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I have a question for you. Do you guys have a relationship, or what type of relationship do you have with the exercise science department or kinesiology department there?
You know what? It doesn't seem like there's a lot. I wish there was, because I've heard great things about their kinesiology program, and they have groups that kind of come into the weight room and use equipment for like this and that for 5 minutes here and there. But I've never met any of the professors.
Wow.
I know I have a lot of athletes that are in the program, so but we don't really correlate with them hands-on that much.
Yeah, that's. I'm just asking because I'm over here at Lindenwood University, just right in St. Louis area, and we have a really good relationship with all the strength coaches, and a few of them have taught some classes, and one of them does the exam prep for the CSCS, and I have a lot of athletes in my classes, and I go in there, you know, all the time, and sometimes I'll train in there, but I usually don't, just so I can get away from work. But yeah, I would really like to see, on the whole, just more, even in, you know, bigger schools or even like, you know, smaller schools, just have the exercise science, you know, kinesiology program just have a better relationship with the strength coaches, because there's just so much collaboration and ideas and projects that could be done and it can really help out the students.
True, yeah.
Definitely. Well, and for me, just coming out of college, I mean, I'm still learning so much. You know, I feel like I have my head in the textbook if I'm not coaching. And, yeah, it would be great to have that relationship with those professors, you know, pick their brain in their downtime or ask them for references on articles and such and such. So, yeah, that'd be a very good thing.
You know, if I can add something real quick, this is because I just encountered this, is we had a listener ask about what books I should study, and you know, because you're mentioning studying, and he's like, I know you guys say go for the textbooks, but then the list of books that were presented to me as here's what I've been reading, I'm not saying they're poor, but in my estimation, they're not textbooks, and so sometimes I'm just surprised at how rarely people, whether it's
the strength coaches or even the local community, they don't tap the professors. Like, if you're next to a university, there's a strength conditioning program. Sometimes you can just get on their website and ask a professor, about, hey, I have a situation. You're an expert. Sometimes the marketing department, even at smaller schools, will facilitate that. They want their experts, their professors, to lend some info. Right, and so we have so many people.
Lottie, it's the same thing with nutrition, right? It's like, whenever they get somebody like on the TV media, they'll just get out a local like MD, or physician and ask about like nutrition stuff, and I'm just like, tap the people at your local, universities that are actually like nutrition professors.
Well, I know another thing that we kind of talked about too is your realization that, not every athlete, not every team is like you and driven to want to be in the weight room, and that's one thing you've had to deal with. And I remember, what was it? I forget the quote that you said. Like, you had a girl walk up to you and you were like, "Just try harder," or whatever.
I did, and I mean, not to stereotype the cheer team, but that's kind of where I run into that the most. They do, they don't really care so much about how much weight they're throwing around or what they do when they're with me. And I've ran into that. And being a female strength coach, sometimes it has its disadvantages when it comes to that, authority thing. I'm not some big, meaty guy. I'm not very intimidating unless, I really put my foot down. And I've learned that I definitely need to do that. And patience has been a big thing for me. And I do. I have some girls, and they're like, "Kaylee, like, I don't know, I don't want to." And I'm like, just do it. Just try harder and just do it. I mean, you're in here for an hour. Get in, get out, do your work. Definitely ran into that. My tennis team, not so much. They do pretty well. I've had to snap at them a couple of times, but they're one of those groups that they really want to get better and they like to work hard. And I don't really have a whole lot of experience with tennis. This is my first go-around, and I just fell in love with them. They are just such awesome athletes, and they are a group of people that are really wanting to work hard and get better at their sport. So that makes it fun. And then I'll find out about the goal.
I was going to say on that one too, it sounds like, and this is a good topic to go into, you have a good relationship with the tennis coach. He seems very interested in the strength side of it.
Yes.
Which I think is big when you're talking strength coaching, and that's coming from, if you're dealing with athletes on, like I'm dealing with baseball players, things like that. It can be huge if they have a sport coach that is actually into them doing strength and conditioning, whereas you have another sport you were kind of telling me about where, well, they don't want them squatting, they don't want them pressing, they don't want, and it was like, pretty much we get to walk around and do, bounce on balls.
Yeah, exactly.
So, dealing with, having a relationship with the sport coach is a good thing too. So,
Phil, that brings up a good point, that why we need strength coaches. I mean, I can't tell you how many head coaches I've talked to. They handle the strength conditioning, for their teams, either because there's not strength staff around or because they're like, I'm the head coach and I know, I don't fix what's not broke. And they have no idea about topics like Kaylee was talking about, periodization, the recovery issues, hypertrophy, all this stuff. When do you do this? What are the goals mid-season versus off-season? And even in nutrition, I can tell you, I over the years as a sports nutritionist at a D1 school, I was like, hey, I better meet with the coaches first so we're on the same page, so I can almost sell the expertise a little, and I'm not saying something to the team that counters something ignorant that they might be saying, and so you don't end up headbutting with the coach,
And that's the thing. That's what I'm kind of getting at. The coach can be your best friend or worst enemy. You might get that coach that knows nothing about strength and conditioning, but is very opinionated on it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we don't want them lifting anything heavy at all. We don't want them blah 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 blah. And gives you a list of here's what you can't do, and then you're left with nothing you can do. So.
Well, and it's funny to mention that some coaches do the strength and conditioning. Well, the tennis coach, he actually used to do tennis strength and conditioning for his team back at a previous school he coached at. So I think he has appreciation for me because he knows, I can send you to them. I know that they're doing something right, and I I think that him having to do it before helped him appreciate me more.
Yeah. So, I don't know what else we got, guys.
Well, Kaylee already brought up the female issue. When we've had MC Powers on, she's now one of the full-time strength coach staff here at Kent State, a local university here, and she has a similar background actually as you do, Kaylee. I have to get you guys to chat with each other because the stuff that she tells me over a beer is like everything you're saying, the frustrations, the hours, the challenges of being a smaller woman, where you don't have that, like you said, meaty alpha male kind of presence where you walk in a room and the team will just listen to you, kind of, that sort of thing.
Well, Andrea Hootie, she is a strength conditioning coach at KU, big idol of mine, and I've met her a couple times, and she's just one of those women. She walks in, she's got that look on her face, and you can just tell she's there for business, and that's something that I need to aspire to work on. She's just a very good idol for a female strength coach to look up to and be like her, honestly.
Yeah. What about the positive side, though? Do you see advantages of being a woman in the strength field? Is there a niche for you? Like, do the women's teams respond to you better? Stuff like that.
Definitely. It definitely has its pros. The girl side, my women's tennis team, they are awesome. They really come to me. They'll come in and sit down about, personal issues with their body, their hormones, such and such. And I think that, and they've even said, if this was a male strength coach, they wouldn't feel as comfortable. They also have a male head coach. So having me on the side, knowing that, I can relate to them, and I've been there, done that as a female collegiate athlete, it helps so much. And I also think being a collegiate athlete in general has helped me relate to my athletes a lot more. Just because, like I said, I've been there, done that. I know the mental toughness it takes, the physical toughness with school and all the stress that comes with it. But being able to relate to my girl teams definitely helps a lot. Even with my guys, they're pretty comfortable around me. They, sometimes they'll say something and I'm like, oh, sorry, like, because, I'm a girl, and I'm like, it doesn't, it's not any different. We're all people here. So, but being able to relate to my girl athletes, I really appreciate. It makes it very fun for me, being able to help them on a personal level. And it's awesome, nutrition is something that I'm learning a lot and that I really like. And for them to come to me and feel comfortable talking about nutrition and their weight also is a big, big plus for sure.
Yeah, I've known some very successful male coaches. I'm thinking of a track coach in particular. Obviously, I'm not going to name any names, but the way he treated his girls was abominable to me. I was shocked as a professional. He's like, I'd get their fat asses on a scale every day, and he put them I'm not kidding. That's what he said. That's what he said. And where he said, talk to this one. I need to know what eating disorder she's got. And he would confront her like that. Like, what eating disorder you got? Aside from the poor grammar, that's just not how you do it. Yeah. That's not how you do it. And he had no rapport on that level. And I think they all lived in fear. So you saw stuff like dehydration to make the weights that he wanted, and it was, and sometimes that's part of sports. I get that, but not in this way, and like you're saying, I could see someone coming to you and saying, I've lost a lot of weight. It was unintentional. I don't know. I missed my period. Is that because I'm overtraining? That sort of thing that could be helpful. I think. Yeah.
When I was a collegiate athlete and I had a head male coach for track, and then our assistant coach was a female, and for that kind of issue, you're gonna go towards your female coach. So definitely that personal stuff. Weight. I mean, I've as a strength coach for my female athletes, weight to me, I don't put them on a scale. It's how they feel. When it comes to being a female athlete, if you are worried about what's on the scale, then you're never going to make any progress, and you're just going to stress yourself out. So I always tell them, we're going to work to where you are at a weight where you feel comfortable, where you feel the most athletic, where you feel powerful, where you feel like you can be swift on the court, that kind of stuff. I don't have them stress about what's on the scale for sure. I mean, that's not healthy for them. Personally, that's how I feel.
Yeah. You had mentioned male versus female teams, or even just different sports. You said they respond differently. To me, it's always interesting to talk to collegiate strength coaches as opposed to, not that Phil doesn't delve into the athletic stuff a lot, but I mean, as far as that kind of university environment, are there some teams that just have a certain culture, like some groups are the partiers, Some are, always getting after it, or like there's gentleman sports, you know what I mean, as opposed to the sports that are a little bit more crude. And again, it's not that Phil doesn't encounter this. I'm just saying, like, I'm assuming when people go to Strength Guild, there's some level of motivation. And with you, they might be in front of you and like not even want to be there. They're just there because they have to be. I don't know.
Oh no, definitely. Well, you have your football team, big macho. We play football stereotype. They come in and they're kind of loud and they throw around the weight for sure. They have that big tough man mentality to them, and sometimes they try and act a little cooler, not so much showy, but they're definitely a different environment when they come in compared to, say, like our men's basketball team. They come in and they're very loud. They're very hyped up. They're singing. They're having some fun. They're high-fiving. They're kind of getting into their mode a little bit more, as to say. They just have that hype to them, And then, compared to my men's tennis team, they come in and they're kind of more chill and relaxed. They definitely work really hard when they're in the squat rack and when they're actually doing their moves. They're very focused. They love to ask questions. They want to make sure they're doing everything right. They're they like me to nitpick them, as opposed to maybe like our basketball team or our football team. They don't really care so much about how they're doing it so much as maybe how much weight they're putting on. And that's just me personally working with the tennis team. They kind of have that more of that drive. But then when they're not in their squat rack, they're a little more relaxed. They're talking to each other. They're motivating each other, and they're having a little bit more fun. They're also a smaller team, so that makes it easier. I only have 8 guys compared to the men's basketball team. There's a JV and a varsity, so you put that together and you have almost 50 guys. So there's definitely that difference between teams. You can feel the vibes kind of shift depending on who's in the weight room. Our women's softball team, they work really hard, but they've also had their days. So they come in and they're tired, and you can tell like they're not as motivated. They're not pushing as hard today, but they've also had mornings where I've walked in and they are just getting after it and working really hard, and the music's pumping and they're slamming med balls. And but you can just definitely tell the vibes that go on. And when I just know personally, when I was lifting with my track team, we would have our mornings where we just weren't feeling it. We're speed squatting, we're pushing prowlers, and we're just like not having the day. But when you kind of can get that hype and you pump each other up and you get some music going and you can make the flow work really fast and really well. And I was blessed. I had a really good team that worked hard and loved to be in the weight room, so we could definitely get a really good vibe going and bounce our energy off of each other. So you can definitely tell between sports on who's in there and who's not.
Cool. Yeah. I just wanted to, one more question, but do you work with swimming at all?
No, Washburn actually does not have a swim team.
Okay.
That's a sport that I have been curious about working with. Their training, it's just they're so much different. They're quite the athlete, honestly. And I've kind of done a little bit of digging, and their training is kind of based how I was trained as a multi. They need to be all around. You have your focuses, but
do you find? I mean, what do you talking to and knowing other like sport coaches? I mean, what do you find what their just kind of their knowledge base is in terms of just exercise, or even just things with basic techniques of exercises, and it's a little bit different depending on where you go. But I mean, what is your experience with like just dealing with the sport coaches?
It kind of depends on the person. I've had a couple of sport coaches, like I said, that are just phenomenal. They kind of know what their team needs, but they also respect that I know what they need also, and we can kind of collaborate and put that together. But I've also dealt with a couple coaches where they might not have quite the knowledge that they think they do. They think they know what's best for their team and their athletes, when in reality, they could actually be doing something a little bit different. They're just scared, or they don't want them to be sore. They don't want them to get hurt. So they're kind of tiptoeing around, they want them in the weight room, but they don't want them actually doing anything where they could risk any kind of injury or any kind of soreness where it could affect how they are playing or performing when they're doing their sport. So it kind of just depends. Some of the younger coaches, I can say, maybe have a little bit more of that knowledge, I think, because now, like, I can vouch for this being in school. You're taught. I was taught so much more about just my degree. I've dipped into nutrition. I dipped into exercise phys and biomechanics and strength and conditioning, FMS testing, all of that stuff. So I just think that school maybe now is a little bit more well-rounded to where I left and I had a base knowledge of just a little bit of everything.
Yeah, that's a good
Gotcha.
question.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, I have
I
one.
think we're
Right.
Before we wrap up, I've been telling people that we'll take tweets during the show, and
Oh, yeah.
this is our first tweet from Jake. So before we go, I'm just going to offer this. Now, my hope is that these will be conversational with the topic of the day. This one is a little bit more just, it's not necessarily on this topic, but I wanted to address this quickly.
This week on Twitter.
It's sort of a nutrition issue. And Jake said, I'm 6 foot 220. I'm 20% body fat. I eat 150 to 180 grams of protein a day. He's concerned that his creatinine levels might be a little high. His blood creatinine is 95 to 110% of maximum. And I think he wants to know why. And I just wanted to offer something very quickly. Jake, if a lot of times you will see lifters with high normal or even slightly above normal creatinine. I think you have to be careful. We are talking about like when Dr. Mike said sometimes the local news will ask a physician something, and a physician might tell you, well, we use creatinine as a marker of renal function, of kidney function. The same goes for BUN, blood urea nitrogen. I think it's important to understand that lifters are not Gen Pop in this way, and I'm not saying that there's absolutely not a problem with your kidneys, but I really doubt it. If you take creatine, for example, it will convert in an irreversible reaction into creatinine, so you can have elevated creatinines like that. It's not because your kidneys are poor filtering, it's just because you're taking creatinine. And the same thing can be said of muscle tissue. Creatinine comes from muscle mass. Oftentimes also more nitrogen in your blood spilling out of that additional muscle mass.
Haley, thanks for joining us. I think it was a good show. That's kind of what we wanted, is just kind of everybody get a feel for, starting out and, your background and what you got going on. So
Doing collegiate is definitely a good experience, but there's nothing like working with high schoolers and being able to mold them from start to finish. So
Yeah, that's fun. All right, cool stuff.
yeah.
all right, guys, I'm out of here.
Alrighty.
Okay, thanks
Later.
for having me.
Bye-bye.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at ironradio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry. And they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.